My name is Rachel Erstad. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the research coordinator with the Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies. And I'm very excited to have Evalynn Fae Taganna Romano, founder of the Custodian Project, here to have a bit of a conversation on the Custodian Project, of how it started, and also where it's going in the future. So, Evalynn, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Evalynn. My pronouns are she, her. Like Rachel mentioned, I am the founder of the Custodian Project. And a big part of my identity that I like to introduce is that I am a daughter of two University of Washington custodians. My mother, who actually recently retired at the end of last year, was a custodian at UW for over 33 years. And my dad, before he passed away, was a custodian for 25 years. So this is a really big part of me and my identity and why I decided to create the Custodian Project.
That's great. Thank you, Evalynn.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can share a little bit about how the Custodian Project started and really what led it to becoming what it is today.
Yeah, so the Custodian Project, which it actually didn't have a name when I started it, um, started during the pandemic. So at the very beginning, March 2020. And I was just noticing a lot of appreciation efforts on social media for healthcare workers, but I wasn't seeing that same kind of care for custodians like my mom and her colleagues who
Mhm.
still had to go to campus and work and clean, um, because they are also considered essential workers. But I felt like that's not how they were being treated. And so I thought that maybe I should work on my own appreciation effort then. And that's when I reached out to close friends and family to ask for monetary support so that I could purchase bread from a local Filipino bakery in Beacon Hill that I really loved, and also coffee from local coffee shops,
Mhm.
with the hope of also supporting small businesses who were struggling during that time.
Yeah.
And so my original plan was just to bring breakfasts to my mom and about 30 of her colleagues.
Mhm.
And when I had enough funds, I actually had way more than I anticipated. And so I thought, to honor my dad, I would go to his area of campus and serve the 30 to 40 custodians there. And because I still had funds, I was just, like, I'm just going to keep going around all of the campus and serve. At the time, I think it was 270 or so custodians.
Mhm.
And also, word was uh, going out that I was doing this effort. And so there were departments and schools around campus who wanted to support these efforts and also donated some funds for me to provide these breakfasts.
Mhm.
So that's how it started. And just this very small act of appreciation, with food. And I also put in thank you notes with the breakfasts as well, was a really big sign for custodians to see that people were actually thinking of them and had them in mind. And so that was really sweet to be able to see that. And so it did start with delivering breakfasts every week all over campus. And that was one way to bring awareness, but then I really wanted to do something bigger. And so I thought of a photography-based storytelling project, and it was that summer of 2020, and I worked with 15 BIPOC custodians to learn about the health impacts of their work and home through stories and photography.
Mhm.
And um, even though I'm a daughter of custodians, I learned so much from their stories that I didn't even think about. And, that work is now a traveling exhibit around campus that's been traveling around since, I believe, September 2021. So each quarter would go to different parts of campus and build awareness, and students, faculty, staff would see this exhibit and have custodians on the forefront of their mind, because that was the whole hope of this project, was to build awareness, uplift custodian voices and wisdom, and hopefully foster an understanding and respect for them and their work.
Yeah.
This quarter, the exhibit is on hold, taking a break, but hopefully starting up again next quarter. And so, yeah, I would say those were the two big things that kind of, um, I guess, like how it started, and from there I've written different op-eds and articles, and for different social media and news outlets. And so it's been really neat to see people reach out and to want to learn about the stories and how they can support custodians, not just at UW, but in the spaces where they spend their time.
That's great. You spoke to this a little bit, especially in regards to just like the big appreciation that you were able to share with custodians through food and coffee, and then also through people being able to tell their story. But I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to how this project has impacted the custodians you've been connected with and how it's impacted you.
Yeah, so it was really interesting because many custodians actually told me that in their decades of work and experience, they had never seen this type of appreciation effort. And so that was really telling for me, that this was kind of a first for them. And so they did share, how much they appreciated this effort that, not only I was showing, but also the community, because this is very grassroots led and really relies on community support. There were community members all over who were creating thank you notes, who were donating funds for the breakfasts. And I would explain that to custodians too, saying it's not just me, there are other people who are thinking of you. And actually, I would say hundreds of people were contributing to this project, definitely over 500 people, probably way more than that. Um, and just knowing that was really helpful for them in continuing their work, and feeling like they were being appreciated and respected in that way.
Mhm.
And I guess in thinking about how it has impacted me, I never thought that doing something what I felt like was so little as, bringing breakfast to my mom and her colleagues, would actually touch people's hearts and would resonate with people. I didn't imagine such an outpour of support for this work. And so that was really surprising for me. And because this project is so personal to me, it made me feel um, yeah, so much gratitude that people actually cared for my mom, or, my parents. Even though my dad isn't alive, this is something I do to honor him and his life and his work. And so that was really special for me. And it definitely helped me and continues to help me keep going in this work, knowing that there are other people who also acknowledge the importance of this project. So yeah, so the impact went, I think, on both sides, for myself and for the custodians.
That's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
And you had mentioned this a little bit earlier about learning a lot from the work of connecting with custodians, even though you had this rich background of understanding the work through your parents. I wonder if you can speak a little bit more to anything you've learned from custodians' experiences that has been surprising.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess I was really surprised at the very tangible things that we could do to show appreciation and respect. So for example, custodians shared, it's really helpful if people put the trash in the garbage can, because sometimes actually there's garbage around the garbage can.
Yeah.
And they're like, we understand that this is our work, but also it's your responsibility too to put things where they belong, So things like putting trash where they belong, and also sorting through your trash accordingly is also very helpful. Things like when they close the bathroom for routine cleaning, please don't enter the bathroom. Because I've actually heard stories of custodians who would close the bathroom off, but people would still go in and use the bathroom. And that was really disrespectful, because they're just trying to do their work. Um, and and even the things that I learned around their carts and how they specifically organize their carts so that it would work well for them. And that was, unique for each custodian. And so I thought that was really neat, that I didn't think too much about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so that kind of goes into this theme that came up in the work around pride of their work.
Yeah.
And so even though I did hear stories of disrespect, I'd also heard stories of pride in the ways that not only they organize their carts,
Mhm.
but being able to see the outcome of their work. Like I had one custodian share how he loved waxing floors. And so after he would wax a floor, he would just kind of admire the shininess of the floor and say like, wow, I did that. And so it was really nice to hear, the pride that they have. Um, and I already knew this growing up around my parents and their custodian friends, but a lot of the custodians are very close knit,
Mhm.
and they see each other as family. And growing up, I would go to my mom's coworkers' homes on the weekends, or we would
Yeah.
have potlucks and just spend time with one another. And I think that close-knit relationship you might not really observe from the outside because a lot of custodians are separated
Yeah.
throughout campus, so you don't really get a glimpse of that. Um, and I guess another thing that doesn't surprise me as much, but might surprise others, is that because a lot of the custodians are immigrants and refugees and people of color, there is a collectiveness
Mhm.
that is really deep and strong within their community of seeing students, faculty, and staff like their family, who they are trying to protect, who they want to make sure are healthy.
Yeah.
Seeing students, a lot of custodians are elders and are
Yeah.
older. And so a lot of them see students like their kids, and wanting them to stay healthy so that they can focus on their studies and school. And I don't think people realize that some custodians think that way. And so I thought that was really interesting when that would come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you see people every day, right? Like, and it's they start to build relationships and everybody. And yeah, I think like that having that relationship is really important. Glad you brought
Hmm.
that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think about, like I think folks may have some familiarity with community-based participatory research. And I think about how I think from my perspective, the custodian project seems to center custodians' needs and requests and priorities, I think, even on a more like deliberate way than even most community-based participatory research does. So I'm wondering if you have advice for folks who are, wanting to really center and develop authentic relationships with whether it's research or whether it sounds like with the custodian project, this didn't start out as research. This started out as gratitude and appreciation, and
Mhm.
opportunities to, support came out of it. But I'm
Mhm.
wondering generally, like whether or not someone is starting from a research approach or if they're starting from an approach of gratitude or anything in between. Would you have just advice for centering and making those authentic relationships?
Mhm. I think for me, what was really helpful is my identity of being a daughter of custodians. I think it made me feel like I was part of the community because
Yeah.
actually a lot of the custodians at UW have known me since I was little. They know my parents, and so I think that really was helpful in building a trusted relationship. So I do think it's helpful to have someone on the research team who is a part of the community, is connected to the community in some way, because
Mhm.
they can provide really unique input that perhaps researchers might not have thought of.
Mhm.
And I also feel like being very consistent. I, started March 2020. I'm still connected to the custodians now. I consistently show up, and that is really helpful.
Yeah.
Not collecting data and leaving, but
Yeah.
actually creating a very sustainable relationship.
Mhm.
Um, Listening is really helpful, providing a space where custodians feel comfortable sharing their experiences and what they need to feel safe, feel healthy, feel like they can do their job well.
Yeah.
Having those spaces is really important, and having a neutral person facilitate those spaces can be helpful because leadership can be intimidating
Yeah.
and perhaps make the space uncomfortable. And so I thought the storytelling sessions were really special because I got to sit and listen to their experiences and ask them what they needed. Um, and and I also definitely believe paying people for their time is needed. Um, for the storytelling sessions, each custodian were paid for their time. They got materials in their preferred language, which is also very helpful. Um, and I think also in thinking about sustainable relationships, um, and trusted partnerships, they would actually reach out to me if they needed something or if they needed
Yeah.
support with something. So, for example, when the vaccines came out, custodians needed help navigating how to sign up for appointments and
Yeah.
location of the places and what they need to know about the vaccine. So I ended up putting flyers at all the clock stations, for example, with my
Yeah.
contact information for them to reach out to me if they needed any support.
Yeah.
Um, and I ended up supporting 50 custodians and their family members in getting connected to a vaccine. So things like that, being really flexible in what you can provide to support the communities you're working with, depending on the needs that they're bringing up into the space, is also really helpful. Um, and yeah, I feel like there are so many things I could say, but maybe I will stick with that, and then if more things come up, I can share.
Definitely. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And that's, I think, something that I will definitely continue to think about in any sort of research that I'm supporting as well.
Mhm.
Especially like the flexibility component of having these relationships where if people are reaching out to you, that's a sign of, like the relationship is not
Yeah.
this transactional, come in, get data, and see you later type of thing, which
Right.
is
Yeah,
not.
and I was just also thinking about a custodian, for example, who wanted support in finding scholarships for their
Yeah.
child, for
Yeah.
example, and there are resources out there that the UW provides to support custodians, but it makes me wonder how many of them feel comfortable reaching out when they don't know who they're talking to. So I think the fact that they've seen my face, they know who I am, that can be really helpful. And one more thing that I'm remembering actually is in the storytelling sessions, one of the custodians shared about how, being on their feet all day
Yeah.
caused issues with their feet.
Mhm.
And of course, that would travel up to their legs and their back. And so one of the efforts that the Custodian Project did was create a partnership with Super Jock and Jill, and they, with their expertise on what type of shoe would fit custodians and their work. And we were able to fundraise enough money for all custodians to receive a comfortable pair of shoes that were
Yeah.
slip resistant, and that has been really helpful actually for custodians and their work. And even my mom loves going for walks now because her knee problems have gone away. And
Wow.
yeah, things like that, maybe I would have never thought that shoes would have been something that would be
Mhm.
important.
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing that would come up in these spaces. So
I think it really speaks to when people feel comfortable naming some of the issues that are going on. beyond just like the ones that we know about, like pay and benefits and things that are, like obviously need to be addressed, and access to PPE, but these other things that would make the day-to-day more comfortable. But
Mm.
you really do need relationship and consistency to maybe feel comfortable sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also want to say, I feel that every time that I've been in a space with you doing any kind of support, I've seen just like the community and the way that folks just are excited to see you, but it's not the first time they've seen you. And it's not the first time they've seen the Custodian Project. And I think that is really telling after, 2.5 years, 3 years, 3 years now, but
Yeah.
this work.
It's very sweet. I definitely feel like a lot of them have accepted me as family, and whenever they
Yeah.
see me, they like give me hugs and
Yep.
ask me how my family's doing.
Yep.
And so that makes me feel like I'm their niece or daughter or something like that.
Yeah, you're gonna go to a lot of holiday parties and family
Yeah.
parties in the future, and already have been, I know. But
Yeah.
yeah, the space last summer was one of the most beautiful spaces I've been in, seeing like the project was being celebrated, but the custodians were being celebrated and centered, and it was just I think a really beautiful space.
That was really sweet. Yeah, I kind of not really forgot, but yeah, that community space last summer was the first community celebration that we've had. And custodians, of course, were invited, and also
Yep.
community members, and I think like 80 to 90 people showed up.
Mhm.
And it was such a lovely space to be together and to celebrate and dance and just
Yep.
have fun and eat together. And so
Yep.
it really reminded me actually of growing up and, going with my parents to work sometimes, because they used to do the night shift. And if they were celebrating something every once in a while, they'd have a potluck. So they would do their
Yep.
work first and then come together and have a potluck and eat and dance. And
Yep.
I was trying to create that same,
Yep.
I guess, yeah, that same memory into this community event. And I felt like it worked really well. So yeah, there were custodians who were like, I'll see you next year. I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is a yearly thing. So yeah, something to think about, I guess, for
Yeah. I mean, I hope it's a yearly thing, but it's a lot of planning. So hopefully there's a team helping,
yeah,
a lot of volunteer outreach.
yeah.
Uh, so throughout this conversation, I really have been thinking about how much that this initial gratitude and appreciation has transformed and become just this community supported, but also just really thoughtful project. And I'm thinking about like all the growth that's happened and all the opportunities to highlight and to really center custodians, and thinking about everything that's happened, stuff that was the initial goal versus where it is now. What do you think about, or what do you imagine the Custodian Project? Where do you imagine it going in the future? What will the future of this look like from your perspective here and now?
Yeah. Yeah, when I think back to the roots of the Custodian Project, because sometimes it's really easy to get lost, you
Yeah.
know, um, I reflect on how this project is rooted in gratitude and appreciation, and respect, and also um, awareness.
Mhm.
And I think whatever I do to build awareness, that's kind of the first step with a lot of advocacy work, is
Mhm.
building awareness. And then once that awareness is built, it's like, okay, so now what do we do?
Yeah.
Um, and so, in thinking about the future of the Custodian Project, I feel very lucky and grateful that I do have a partnership with leadership in UW facilities and UW building services, um, who I openly communicate with, and that's really helpful in being able to continue to show up for custodians, having
Yeah.
this relationship, and also really helpful to have student involvement
Mhm.
from UW groups, because there are UW student groups who reach out and want to support. And so, I'm really envisioning supporting students in their vision of
Yeah.
how they want to support custodians and share their gratitude and appreciation. And so I want to be that support person for them rather than me actually leading all of the
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what it's sort of moving towards in the UW
Yeah.
realm. But this project used to be called UW Custodian Project because it was hyper focused on a space that I felt really connected to personally and academically.
Mhm.
And now it's called the Custodian Project because I want people to kind of expand in thinking about all of the different community spaces that they spend their time in and the people who are working behind the scenes to clean up
Mhm.
that space. And hopefully, having this broader name can resonate with more people because
Yeah.
some people might not be connected to UW and think, well, how does that relate to me? So that is also really helpful. I'm also thinking a lot about policies,
Mhm.
what are policies that could be changed or shifted to better support custodians and their health and work.
Yeah.
And so thinking more changes that could be made,
Mhm.
and a lot of that is done through advocacy and partnerships,
Yeah.
and so that's what I'm really hoping that it kind of go towards in the future, and yeah, and so that's what I'm thinking the future might hold.
Well, I'm excited to see it and to hopefully be able to volunteer and be there, especially those annual events, but other volunteer events as well, because it's been really exciting to see it even grow in the last year that I've been more aware of the Custodian Project. And yeah, I really want to thank you for your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about the Custodian Project or anything at all?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say is how much I really appreciate the collaborations and partnerships that have come up for the Custodian Project. For
Yeah.
example, the UW Medical Center was really inspired by the exhibit that came out of the photography-based storytelling sessions. And so
Yeah.
they did their own version working with four environmental service workers and creating story poster boards to kind of share their stories. And then that led to actually a collaboration with interprofessional education workshops, with having a workshop specific to how important environmental service workers are in the
Yeah.
hospital setting. So those are custodians in the hospitals, and seeing them as part of the care team.
Yeah.
And so I really love like the different opportunities that are coming up and things that other organizations are thinking of to continue to build awareness.
Yeah.
And so I really hope that's part of the future of the Custodian Project too, and thinking about, you know, this is what I'm focused on. So how can I support the custodians in this space, in this area?
Yeah.
And I'm always happy to help brainstorm and think of ideas on what that might look like. But yeah, it's pretty neat and exciting of how something like bringing coffee and Bundy cell one day can become this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you again so much for sharing kind of about the background as well as the current work and the future of the Custodian Project. And I really appreciate your time. And yeah, thank you so much, Evalynn.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right, I'm going to stop recording.